Welcome to Phoenix and Flame, my podcast about rising from the ashes on the wings of boundaries. I'm Dana Skaggs, a psychotherapist known as the Queen of Boundaries. If you are new to Phoenix and Flame, please subscribe so you will be notified of new episodes. Visit Dana Skaggs, DanaSkaggs.com for a free quiz to discover how boundaries are impacting your life. This podcast is not intended as psychotherapy. If you are in crisis, please call 911 or contact your local crisis hotline. Welcome, friends. Whether you're out on a walk, running errands, or relaxing at home, it's wonderful to connect with you. Joining us today is Kristal Desantis. Now, Kristal is a licensed marriage and family therapist known for her expertise in relationships, trauma work, and sex therapy. Her insights have been featured in publications such as Newsweek, HuffPost, The Good Men Project, and Time. Kristal, welcome to Phoenix and Flame.
Yay, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is fantastic. So you have a lot of understanding regarding male psychology and the challenges faced by men in contemporary society. So just kind of fill us in on your journey and what got you interested in that focus. And I have a lot of questions and we'll just kind of weave back and forth.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, I grew up in a family of a lot of girls. I am the oldest of 6 girls. And then when I went to college, I went to an all-women's college. So, until I was, out of college, I was just really surrounded by women, by female energy. I also have 3 aunts, so it's just very, it's kind of all in the women's sphere. And then I didn't date at all, until I went to college, and I wasn't even exposed to it. I was actually raised in Japan. So dating culture was very different. So I moved to America, I went to an all-women's college, and I started being exposed to American dating culture. And I was just I was so interested in how different the women are socialized here versus the way the men are socialized here. I also got my first job working in a sports bar. And so it was just so apparent to me coming from a different culture that what men and women are 2 different societies. And at some point we expect them to live in the same house. I would go, obviously I was in an all women's college. So, it's almost like a giant sorority. And so it's beautiful and, cozy. And then I would go to a frat party and I'd be like, people live here, And so that is really what kind of got me curious about, what are men doing in this society? Of course, I grew up around all women and went to an all women's college. So I was very familiar with kind of the messaging and the scripts and the socialization of women. But I was completely unfamiliar with what the men were doing. So it really just started from a place of personal curiosity of what's happening over there?
That's awesome. Let me ask you first really quickly. I'm curious about the differences that you noticed within the Asian culture versus when you came to America and the dating and the male-female roles and the expectations there. Right from the jump, what were some of the things that you noticed?
It's so profoundly different. The Asian dating culture, especially back then, right, when I was raised there, there really wasn't a dating culture. Throughout high school, throughout middle school, there's no dating. You're focusing on school, and then the idea is that at some point you will eventually find somebody. But there's a lot of family involvement in choosing a partner. And I remember one moment where I was working at the sports bar and a girl, another coworker came home and she was like, ooh, or came back to work and she was like, ooh, I went on this date with this guy and she was all excited. And I was like, ooh, who is his family? And she was like, what? And so that's really a huge, big difference. Also, one thing about Japanese culture too, even when you start working, it is very gender divided in that like pregnant women and married women, especially back then, it's changed a little bit now, but the expectation was that once you got married, even if you were in the workforce, if you got pregnant, you would leave. You would leave the workforce and, take care of the home. And so Japanese marriages tended to be almost like 1950s America traditional.
Okay.
In that. So then coming to America, I was like, what is happening? I don't understand any of this. So yeah, that's really where it started. Just me trying to understand this culture of relationships, dating, socialization of men versus women, and really starting from a blank slate almost.
Love that. Love that. Now, I've talked to some men and, I have grown sons of my own and I've had patients. Really, I'm glad you have focused on this area because there seems to be, in this particular culture right now, there's a difficulty that they're having. They're frustrated with the expectations. They feel like it's moving. It's like the shell game. They can't figure out what they're supposed to do or not supposed to do. They can't. They feel like it's not really safe to express what they want for fear of getting criticized or it's really frustrating. So I was just kind of wondering what your experience was with them as you were studying and working with the men and with relationships and the role of how sex plays in with all of that and what that means to them and all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is the biggest thing. And that's something that I address in kind of the prologue of my book of, the back in the day, right? The roles of men were very traditionally kind of categorized into you are the protector, you are the provider, and your job is to procreate, right? The kind of the 3 Ps of masculinity.
Okay.
And that all changed very quickly, right? So, and a lot of research in my book is kind of from an anthropological and sociological perspective in that prologue of, this anthropologist basically went to multiple different cultures, different societies and asked men this question, like, what does it mean to be a man? And they all kind of boiled down to these, like, my job is to protect my family, my job is to provide for my family, and my job is to give my wife babies if she wants them. Right. Which, there's not really, back in the day, it wasn't really a question. It was like, of course your wife wants babies. So as a man, that's part of your job is you give your wife babies, right? You procreate. Otherwise, if you fail in any one of these 3 categories, you are not a high value man, right? If you can't protect your wife, you can't provide for them, or you can't give her the babies she wants, like, sorry, bud, your line dies out. Right.
Yeah.
And again, like all of that changed incredibly quickly with the modern relationship, right? Because then women started to be like, well, I mean, protect us from who, right? Just stop hurting us, right? And then provision. It was like, well, we have jobs too. So what else are you gonna bring to the table, right? And then also for the modern marriage, it's like procreation is by no means enough. Where's the parenting, right? And then, of course, there are some women that are like, I don't want to procreate. So then what you got, right? And so that's really what I found is that the script for women changed dramatically. And, the focus wasn't so much on this idea of like, we are marrying for protection or provision or survival. It was more about like, we want partners who can meet us emotionally, right? But for men, that script hasn't changed very much. I mean, if you look at the messages for men, and that was part of why I wrote my book, was because when I was working with couples and I was looking for resources for them, there's so many books for women on emotional intelligence, setting boundaries, getting a healthier relationship with yourself, healing your inner child. And when I would look at the books directed to men, it was how to be fit, how to have a good business, like, finance books and fitness books. And I was like, what? So we have these like multifaceted women and we're still trying to shove men into these very objectifying categories. And then we wonder why these marriages are failing. It was almost like, on a very basic level, I was like, okay, so, we walk into a sorority house and it looks like this. And we walk into a frat house and it looks like this. And at some point they're supposed to live in the same house. How? You know?
Well, that you bring up an excellent point, because I'm hearing some women say, particularly ones that maybe are widowed or divorced or something like that, that they are somewhat resistant or
Mm-hmm.
reticent to engage in another relationship for fear of being kind of cast as the mom,
Mm-hmm.
someone to come and, keep the house clean, wash the clothes, do the grocery shopping, cook the meals, and they're not interested in that. So sometimes it seems like there's a disconnect between
Absolutely.
what men want, what women want, and how, like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, how the culture has shifted and changed, and now they're having a hard time finding one another.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, and that's the thing in my work, and I'm sure, you've experienced this too, is like, men are people just like anybody else, right? Men have deep emotional lives. Men have desires for deeper connections, right? And and so I think that's also part of what I was seeing is that, men are people too, right? But where are the tools and the resources that help them develop their humanity, their emotional depth, healing their inner child and all of the things that we really give to women? Like, why isn't there that attention for men?
Mm.
Right. And I hear that, right? Like women are very frustrated, right? Where they're like, you know, basic emotional safety. Like, why do I have to teach my partner that? Or basic life skills. Why do I have to teach my partner that? I would rather not have a partner than do the emotional labor of like raising a husband. Absolutely not. Right. Um, but what I'm seeing is also the failure of kind of society to let men know that those things are important. Right.
Mhm.
And so that's part of, I mean, what I'm very passionate about it clearly is that like trying to bridge that gap is like men who want to meet their partner's needs in that way. Like, I want to be more emotionally intelligent. I want to understand, how to show up for you as a partner. But how do I, how do I bridge, from A to B? How do I get there? Because there really just aren't that many resources out there for the men that want to make that journey.
Mhm.
Right. Um,
Right. So
so,
let me ask you this, because along what you're saying is, and I'm hearing men say that they kind of get caught in a trap where they want to be able to feel safe and free to express their need to their partner and say, "Is it okay when I come home from work? I just want to sit next to you. Can I have a hug? Can you just wrap me up in your arms, and can I just lay my head in your lap? Can you just rub my hair with your hand? Not because I want you to be my mother, but because I want that emotional connection with you." But then, so on the one hand, they feel people saying, or women saying, express your emotional needs to us. But then when they do, many of them get slapped figuratively by the woman. She's saying, "Why don't you act like a man? Why are you acting like some kind of little
mhm,
boy who needs a mommy?" And so then they get trapped. It's like, well,
mhm.
ha- what do I do? Can I express it? Can I not express it? What's going on here?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's very much where a lot of men are right now, where they feel like, "Damned if I do, damned if I don't," right? If I take the leap to be vulnerable and open with my partner, you know, what if she gets the ick? I don't know if you've heard this term, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
where women are like, "Ew, I saw my husband cry and it changed how I felt about him," or, "Ooh, he told me about his, whatever, his trauma," and like, ugh. And that's a really real thing, right? Women have also
Yes.
participated in keeping men in these boxes, right? It's like Brene Brown says, her little anecdote of telling, doing her speech about bravery and courage, and a man coming up to her afterwards and saying, "My wife would rather see me die on my horse than fall off."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's also a big piece of this puzzle is, are we making it safe for men to be vulnerable, or are we putting them in this double bind of all these messages saying we want emotionally intelligent partners, but we don't actually have the capacity to receive those emotionally intelligent partners and meet them without, like you said, seeing it as, okay, congratulations for doing the bare minimum. Oh, you want me to be your emotional like nanny, you want me to be your mom. And a lot of that, again, it's put men in this very like double bind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I remember talking to a man one time, and he was very, good profession, he had done well for himself, and he had kind of a reputation as being somewhat of a rake, right? Somewhat of a, out there player, but he felt comfortable just chatting with me. And he said what came out was his love language was physical touch, and he needed that physical touch. But for him, because of the position he was in, just asking for that or reaching out for that wasn't really received well. But what was received well was him playing the role of a player. And he would actually end up using sex, but not actually for the sex itself. I mean, of course, that was pleasurable, and he said sure, but the that wasn't the main goal for him. The main goal for him was to have that physical touch connection with a partner, and the sex was simply the vehicle, but it made him appear like a player, and that's the reputation. But see, that was the reputation that women would accept, and he didn't feel safe being honest about what what was the true motivation behind wanting to have sex.
Absolutely. And that is so common. I mean, there's a lot of research about this too, of how touch starved so many men are, right? It's like you think about like female friends can, be very touchy with each other, very
Yes.
complimentary of each other, and very, giving each other hugs and touching each other's hair or whatever, right? It's like it can be very tactile. But for a lot of men, the only way they can get that is either through kind of the wrestling thing, right? It's like, okay. But then after a certain point, like maybe after you get out of high school or college and, the wrestling thing kind of stops, it's like there are so many men that just go through their lives having no physical contact at all with anybody, right? And so that kind of, like you said, like the only way they can actually get some kind of physical contact is to potentially engage sexually with a woman, right?
Yeah. And I'm wondering, is that included, because you developed what's called the strong model. Tell us about that. That's really interesting to me, the strong model of relational therapy.
Yeah. So that was something else that, as I was working with couples and as my kind of focus was on men, one thing I noticed is that the therapeutic field is very heavily female. And so we very much like to talk about like, sitting with our feelings, sitting with our emotions. And one of my passion populations is veterans and first responders. And these are very action oriented men. Right? Yes, they absolutely have feelings. A lot of them were coming to therapy because they were struggling with PTSD or some kind of relational trauma. But there was this disconnect of like, I don't want to just go in a room and like, you're going to try to make me cry. And then what? Like, what's the point? And so that was part of developing the STRONG model. It's an acronym for the 6 pillars of what a healthy relationship needs. And so I really wanted to kind of speak to men in their language of like, here's a blueprint. Here is an action plan. If you do cry, it's because there's a plan here. It's like that. So the first thing in a healthy relationship is safety. So that's the S. And what does safety mean? Being safe with your emotions, being able to self-regulate, being stable, and then having some self-awareness. So these are the 4 S's of safety, because again, safety is a big thing. And often when I brought up safety as like the foundation of a relationship, women got it immediately. Women were like, absolutely. I need a safe relationship. Otherwise I don't want to stay. And men, again, especially with veterans and first responders, they're like, what do you mean? I'm the guy they call when there's danger. Like, I am the safest guy ever. What are you talking about? And again, with men, it tends to be this binary of there are good guys and there are bad guys. And a lot of the guys, they were like, I'm the good guy. I'm the hero. Like, what are you talking about? Safety. Of course I'm safe. And so breaking it down into, self-awareness. Are you understanding the impact you have on your partner? Are you self-aware of what you're bringing into this relationship, right? Because we all bring stuff into relationship. The second is the skills for stability, which is that basic, are you able to keep your family stable if your wife is incapacitated, right? So if she gets sick, she goes out of town, does the family fall apart? And again, so many couples, it's the basic stability stuff, right? It's like, I can't go out of town without him calling me every 5 minutes of like, where's the bottles? Where's the food? Where's the, it's like, keeping your family safe is also helping keep it stable, right? And then also there were certain things like if, and again, as I kind of say in my book, it's like you can't bring the stability if you are the chaos, right? And so if you have a, unaddressed mental health issue, or if you have an out of control, drinking problem, or in some way that you are bringing the chaos, your wife won't be able to feel safe with you because you're not stable in yourself.
So
Right?
let me ask you this, Kristal. In that
Mhm,
safety factor, the S of strong,
mhm,
does it talk also about if they feel safe? How, because
mhm.
what I'm hearing you say so far is how they can bring a scenario, a situation where they're helping their partner to feel safe, and what that looks like, because they're like, well, I'm a first responder. Of course, I'm the hero. I'm the,
Uh-huh.
you know, and does it also address what does it look like for them? What do
Yes.
they need for their own safety in the relationship? What?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really what, is again, when you know what safety feels like, you can also recognize unsafe people. And that was
Mhm.
also something that I saw a lot of men, they're kind of, especially men who are like, I see myself as the hero. They would choose partners who were not stable because then they were like, I'll be your stability. I'll save you,
Ah,
and they would pick projects that would actually not be able to show up equally. Right. And so they were constantly in this position of providing safety for them without ever being on the receiving end of that. So absolutely, it was, that's kind of built in there of, yeah.
well, that makes so much sense because if
Mhm,
they're getting their value, their
mhm,
identity from being this hero. If you
mhm,
think about the hero, villain, victim triad,
mhm,
every hero needs a victim and usually a villain out there somewhere, but
mhm,
that's in finding that victim is going to just create problems.
mhm.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I bet you did some interesting work in helping them get to a place where they could see their value outside of being a hero, where so they stopped choosing projects.
Yeah, yeah. And this, I mean, I love this work because, at the end of the day, it's really about allowing people to be human, right? Because
Yeah.
even being a hero, I mean, it's a great thing, but it's also in some ways, I mean, it's a role,
Hmm.
right? And so the same thing that I mean, what women got with the feminist revolution is the ability to choose how to be human, right? It's like we weren't just relegated to being mothers, being wives, being, roles. It's we were allowed to say, no, no, you have worth as a human. Like you could be a woman with no children. You could be a woman who chooses not to be a wife. You could be a woman who can whatever, and you still have inherent value. And
Hmm.
men still haven't quite gone through that revolution where they're still very much getting the message that your value is in the role you play in society. And this is where, I mean, again, there's a whole bunch I could go into here, but there's so many men that have this purpose void where they're like, well, I don't see a place for me in society. So I guess I'll just check out. I'll just play video games all day because, like, at least
Hmm.
there I get to complete a level and get to win stuff and get to, feel like I'm progressing. Because when I
That's
look,
legit. Yes.
yeah. Um, and so, and then, gosh, the book, The Boy Crisis, they talk about it. As like the multi-option woman and the no option man is what has happened, right? It's like women that get the message you could be anything. With men, it's like, do you have a lot of money? Still, right? Still the message is, do you have a lot of money? Are you over 6 feet tall? Are you really hot? If not, then yeah, nobody really wants you around.
Hmm. And that
Yeah,
sounds, when we say it like that, it sounds, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? But it's true.
it is.
It is absolutely true because just like you, I've talked to men that feel that way, and they say that the women that they try to engage with or approach for like a potential relationship or just getting to know one another, just talking, whatever,
Mhm,
that is frequently that question comes up.
mhm,
First of all, the men who aren't super tall, that's
mhm,
hard right off the
mhm,
jump. And then
mhm,
even if they are taller, there's that question invariably, what can you give me? How much money do you have? Kind of
mhm.
thing. And it's very disheartening for them.
Yeah. And that's part of, what I talk about, even in that safety chapter of my book, right, is that self-awareness of, are you also presenting yourself as a role, right? Are you trying to attract women with your wallet? If so, then don't be surprised that the women that you're attracting are the women that are attracted to your wallet, right?
Yeah. Excellent.
And really kind of getting away from like, it's, men versus women. It's like, there are healthy people that will value you for your humanity, and there are unhealthy people, right, that are only looking for the hottest girl, the hottest guy, the richest, the woman that's going to be blank, right, the trophy wife, the blah, blah, blah. And that's going to continue to be true. But if you don't want to play that game, here are the skills and tools to have a different type of relationship, right? And to
Fabulous.
recognize when you find somebody else who has the same kind of core values that you do.
So I have another question for you, and I know we still need to get to the TRONG.
Those are quicker.
So what recommendations would you have for someone who's sort of stuck in that position where they feel like they don't fit whatever criteria, and yet they're trying to reach out and feel some possibility of a healthy relationship? What's one practical tip that you could say that person is listening right now and they're thinking, my gosh, what Kristal is saying is absolutely spot on. What she and Dana are talking about, that's my life. I'm walking that right now. What is like one practical tip that you might give them for what do they do when this is the reality for them?
And, I think one thing that I see as a difference between men and women is their support system, right? If a woman goes on a bad date with a guy that's like, hey, you're too, blank for me, she has her friends that can be like, no, you are amazing. You are gorgeous. Like,
That's true.
that can validate her worth. Men don't generally have that, right? It's like if they go on a bad date and, friend, hey, how'd that date go? Meh. All right, well, good luck next one. Or, oh, that sucks, man. But that validation of it, so kind of practically, is create a group of people, create a support system that you really truly feel values you for who you are, right? Because that's where you can come back to if, your perceived worth, right? If somebody's like, oh, you're not tall enough for me, or, oh, I was hoping that, you would be having a fancier car or whatever, that you have that support system to validate, like, no, your worth is so much more than that. Your worth is not by any means determined by your external factors, right? Having that support system can also help you start believe it yourself. And that's where, of course, therapy comes in, of really figuring out why your worth has been so dependent on external factors. And for a lot of men, I mean, that was the script they were given. Right. And so unlearning and deconstructing that script so you can actually feel confident that your worth is not dependent on any external factors.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. So what is the T in your strong acronym?
So T is trust, which is, again, in doing a lot of the research, trust is often kind of the main thing that people talk about when they talk about what relationships need. As a trauma-informed therapist, I was like, you don't trust people you don't feel safe with. So let's start with S. But then T, trusting your partner, building trust between the two of you. I talk about attachment styles in the T chapter as well. And also how to repair when trust is broken. Because, we're all just human. We're going to make mistakes. There's going to be miscommunications. How do you rebuild that trust? How do you repair a rupture? Right.
That is a big deal. I mean, Kristal, that is a huge one right there. And I have a feeling we're not going to get to listen. Listeners, you're going to just get the book. I'm telling you, this is a big teaser. You're going to have to go get the book because we're not going to have the trust thing is so huge because what we've been through in the past relationships and things that have happened to us, and we bring that forward. It's so hard. And I hear this in so many people's stories on a regular basis of how hard it is for them to trust this next person because of what they've been through before. Did you hear some stories like that of those situations?
Absolutely. And I have some little client stories in my book as well.
Yeah.
And so part of it is that, right, learning to trust yourself, right? Learning to trust that you can make good choices, learning to trust that you can leave a relationship that's not meeting your needs, learning to trust that you will know what your line is, right? Because often where I see people with trust issues is they're like, I gave them so many chances and I just kept getting betrayed. And it's like, well, maybe let's work on your self-trust of being able to know when this person is not worthy of your trust or your belief once again, right? And then also so many times, right, we talk about trust and all of that, but we don't talk about, well, what do you do if inevitably you break your partner's trust, right? Like, might be a mistake, but they thought you were going to be there at noon, you showed up at 1, and now they're hurt and they feel stood up, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't, that can lead to so many conflicts as opposed to what can I do to repair, right?
Right.
And just going straight to that, like, I don't need to defend. We don't need to fight about who was right, who was wrong. Let's just go straight to repair. How can we recover from this? What do
I
we
love
need to
that. And
learn from
the
this?
repairs, like, because
Mhm.
when you see patterns, because I know when I talk to people, it's like, does something like that happen if you show up at 12 and they show up at 1? Yeah, that wasn't a good thing, but is that a one-off? Or is that
Mhm.
something that they do regularly? So that I love the
Yeah.
word repair, because if they're truly repairing something, then you're not
Mhm.
going to continue to see that pattern.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, I know our time is up, but I did want to ask one last question.
Mhm.
So I love being able to address misconceptions, debunking myths, these kinds of things. So the question is, what are some common misconceptions about masculinity and relationships that you would like to debunk in this work that you're doing?
I really, a couple of things. Toxic masculinity, um, like that phrase, leads to a lot of defensiveness. So the thing I like to talk about is like masculinity and also performative masculinity, right? So the idea that masculinity is something that you have to perform, it's something you have to earn. And that's also often where we kind of talk about toxic masculinity, right? It's like these men trying to prove themselves in this way that turns out to be very harmful either to themselves or to others. And so just kind of dispelling that myth of like masculinity is not something that you have to perform. It's not something you have to earn. If that's something, I mean, it's the masculine and feminine like polarities are inside all of us, right?
Yes.
And it's just about finding the balance of your personal expression of that, and that's completely yours, right? You don't have to perform it for anybody else. Nobody else gets to tell you how much of a man you are. Nobody else gets to take away your man card. Nobody has that power over you, right? And so if you are a man, like you are inherently able to inhabit your masculinity in whatever way you choose. You just got to embody it. You just got to claim it. And it's yours.
I
Right?
love it. I love that. So, okay, Kristal, I want to make sure that my listeners can be able to get more, because the acronym STRONG, we covered the S and the T, and we just didn't have time. So, listeners, I know you want to know what the R and the O and the N and the G all stand for. You can get all of this in Kristal's book. Now, you're saying go to Amazon, and I'll have this in the show notes.
Mhm.
So go to Amazon.com, and the title is
Strong.
the strong model of relational therapy.
The book is called Strong, a Relationship Field Guide for the Modern Man.
Love it.
And it's
Okay.
also on Audible if you're more of a listener.
Fabulous.
And then
And
my,
that the Audible is helpful too. People
yeah.
are doing something, they're
Mhm.
folding laundry or doing
Mhm.
dishes or they're in a car and they just want to listen like a
Yeah.
podcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of, the audience for this book. Obviously, women can read it too, but, I wanted to make it easily accessible. And a lot of men, the feedback was like, oh, I'm not going to read a book, but I'll listen to something. So I absolutely put it on Audible for that reason. Um,
Fabulous.
but it also, my website is strong.love. So
Okay.
easy.
Put that on here too.
Um, but yeah.
Got it. Kristal, thank you so much. You have really spent your precious time and your wisdom and your experience and brought that here to me and my listeners. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, I know you have heard so much today, things that Kristal has shared with you. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I have a friend, I have a coworker, I have a family member that needs to hear what Kristal Desantis is saying. Take this episode, take the link, copy and paste it, send it in text. send it an email, post it on your favorite social media sites so that we can grow our Phoenix and Flame community, so we can reach out and let people know you're not alone. I hope you have had a wonderful day. I hope the rest of your day goes fantastically. I'm Dana on Phoenix and Flame.